Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We're just going to wait a few minutes for people to trickle into the webinar, and we'll start in about 2 or 3 minutes. Thanks, everyone, for joining today. We'll just give people another minute or two to trickle in if you're just joining us. Thank you. All right, it looks like we got a good group of people. I want to thank everybody for attending our webinar today on Lunar New Year 2023. And we're going to talk about why it's not a good idea to put off resiliency planning during especially that time period that's right on our doorstep next year. So just a little bit about me before we get started. I'm the VP of Product here at Macrofab. We're an electronics manufacturing platform. My background specifically in a couple different industries, started my career in software, shifted over to hardware in the IoT space for the energy industry, and did a lot of things with edge processing and having predictive analytics for the energy applications. And most recently, working in product at Macrofab, working with our teams, developing all of the software products that our customers love to use that enable electronics manufacturing. So excited to be here with you today and just share a little bit about how you can make your supply chain more resilient, and we'll even walk through a demo about how the platform helps you be more proactive. But we'll start off first with a little bit about what Lunar New Year is and why it's relevant to electronics, the electronics supply chain. We'll talk about, where are electronics typically produced. I think there's some interesting stats there that it may not be immediately obvious what countries and places these products are coming from and how that creates risk. We'll talk about Lunar New Year specifically and the effect on manufacturing, and then we'll talk about some of the indirect effects of this holiday, and then we'll walk through what you can do to prepare, and we'll show a demo of the platform and how you can be more proactive. And then we'll set aside some time for questions from the audience. Happy to share any insights that I can. So starting with Lunar New Year, there's the phrase that you may have heard, Gong Hei Fat Choi, literally meaning wishing you great happiness and prosperity. Lunar New Year, it starts in 2023 on around January 22nd, and this year is the year of the rabbit. And it's a 2-week celebration, and it lasts all the way up until what they call the Lantern Festival. But almost a sixth of the world's population celebrates Lunar New Year. And you may have heard it referred to as Chinese New Year. The reality is it's celebrated all throughout the APAC region. Many people have family in China, and it's just a more broad, almost global holiday at this point. And the thing to keep in mind is it's a mass migration event. Millions of people are traveling to and from China, and as a result, a lot of businesses are closed down during this time period. But why does that matter, and why is it relevant to your supply chain? So a couple different reasons. And first, let's talk about where are electronics products made. I think a lot of the focus right now that you see in the news is focused on chips and semiconductors and integrated circuits. The reality is, the big players there are Taiwan and China. You've got upwards of 50% of the global market for integrated circuits coming out of those two countries, which definitely are celebrating Lunar New Year. And then when you look more broadly at the category of electronics as a whole, it's very much so dominated by China and as well as Hong Kong. Upwards of almost 70% of the market electronics market is being exported out of there. So that's from a macro perspective. But there's also, it's not just about the chips and the finished product. You also have to think about what are the other different pieces that go into an assembly, electronic product assembly. And one of the core components there is the bare PCB board itself. There's this saying that I think Printed Circuit Board Association of America, they're lobbying Congress right now for more emphasis on the supply chain and PCBs and domestically in the U.S. But they have the saying of chips don't float. We need somewhere to solder these chips onto the board, and you can see in this interactive graph here since the early 2000s, the U.S. was making about almost 30% of the bare PCB boards, but that's basically been globalized over the last 20 or so years, and I think it's less than 5% of bare PCB boards are made in the U.S. and the companies that are left are focused more so on defense, aviation, some of these industries where you have to have a supply chain in the U.S. So that poses a challenge when you've got almost 60% of PCBs, the bare PCB boards being made in China, and then Taiwan filling in some of the rest of the space there. So we have to think about a holiday like Lunar New Year and a lot of companies that manufacture these boards closing down. It's going to have a drastic impact on the supply chain, and we'll talk about how soon that starts and what you can do to be proactive there. But some other things to keep in mind as well too. It's most of the population is on this holiday. Very little assembly, if not at all, is happening. Not much is shipped, and sometimes the standstill because of the holiday can be 3 weeks or more. And as people come back, they're working through a backlog of products. I think one thing that makes this particularly challenging, the holiday alone is one thing, but we're still very much dealing with COVID in all parts of the world. And China has taken the stance of a zero COVID policy. So they're very willing and able to lock down large portions of the population. This graph here actually came out yesterday from Johns Hopkins. It's showing a 7-day rolling average of testing. And you can see there that we're at the beginning of a trend line to start going up. And if they continue on this zero COVID policy, you're gonna have a double whammy effect of Lunar New Year and potentially COVID lockdowns exacerbating everything. So let's talk a little bit more about where some of those other effects may lie. So not only do you have to think about lockdowns in China, but you have to also think backwards of other companies are aware this is happening. And so you start to see all the different other manufacturing centers of excellence. All these companies that are planning ahead of time are starting to take up the remaining capacity that's available, say in Europe or in the US, and they're shifting all their production ahead of us. So depending on how complex your supply chain teams are at your particular company, you may or may not be ahead of that curve and being able to shift production seamlessly. And it's not only just electronics, it's also the port shuts down almost entirely in that region. And so you have a whole lot less traffic of shipments coming out of the country. So you get, shipment rates for freight start to go up, and then you'll see air freight as well too start to balloon up. So you definitely have to plan well in advance for this critical time period and consider what the rising costs that are going to happen in this specific window of time. What I wanted to share with you, this is something that we do for some of our internal planning, and I apologize if some of the text is a little bit hard to read, but I'll try to walk you through it. What we're looking at here is on the x-axis is days where you could possibly place your order with MacroFab, and this chart starts at kind of late November, stretching out all the way to March. And you'll see here in the middle where the little rabbit is, that's the actual holiday of Lunar New Year. So it's kind of late January 27th, thereabouts, and running to the beginning of February. But the thing to keep in mind is you actually have to get your orders in with your contract manufacturer well in advance of that, just because there's many different stages of not only just quality checking, where we have to manage vendors in that region of the world. And so right now, our preliminary guidance to our customers is you really want to get your orders in really by that second week of December is kind of where it's that close for comfort. And then, you'll see in the chart here, once you start hitting that second week of December, the lead times are really going to start shooting up. And this is just on an average design. This is not for literally everybody's design, because our platform takes into account the complexity of your design and how long it might take to manufacture. But on average, you might see anywhere from 8 to 10 business days extra lead time that you would normally see during a time like Lunar New Year. So definitely think about, we're already, November 10th. Think about getting your orders in between now and that first or second week of December, because otherwise, all bets are off. Things become a lot more challenging, and you're going to start to see inflated lead times, inflated costs. So I just wanted to point that out there for our customers, and something to keep in mind. There are alternate options that you will have as we approach Lunar New Year and we're in the midst of the holiday itself. Here at MacroFab, we offer a guaranteed 10-day service. And with our 10-day service, that's 10 business days from the second you place the order to when it ships from our facility. A lot of contract manufacturers, you'll see that they advertise, say, 2 or 3 day lead times, but there's a lot of asterisks there in that it's after they receive your materials and whatnot. And so sometimes, those services can actually be longer than 10 days. Ours is a guaranteed 10-day service, and it's a full domestic supply chain. So we're sourcing the bare PCB boards from US vendors. We're using component distributors that are located in Texas, Minnesota, all throughout the US. And the guarantee where that comes in is if we don't hit the 10-day mark, we'll refund you the difference between our next slower tier of service. So we really are incentivized and want to get that out on a guaranteed timeline for you guys. And it's the same great quality that we have at MacroFab as always. The thing to keep in mind, for any given individual order, we can only support up to 50 units. And then depending on the size, if you have a really big board, the other bound to keep in mind is it's 6 panels worth of product. But that cutoff is around 50 units, maybe give or take, plus or minus 15 or so units, depending on the size of your product. And so that 10-day service is a great option, and I'll walk you through that in the demo of how to pick that if you're not familiar with that. And then some other things that you can do to prepare. So leading up, I put these in 2 broad categories: leading up to Lunar New Year and then after Lunar New Year. So number one, knowing the lead time of your product for every single component and the costs, because those costs could vary dramatically if you're having to place orders during Lunar New Year. And then placing those orders to ship well ahead in advance. our guidance is that cutoff where you're starting to get uncomfortable is by second week of December. And think about what you're going to need in Q1. It's just such a volatile time period that your best bet, if you have visibility into how much product you need in Q1, we would recommend you go ahead and order that right now in Q4 before that mid-December cutoff period, just so that you guarantee that, hey, you have the product that you need for your end customers. And then during and after Lunar New Year, there's a couple things you could do. So just make sure you're working with your contract manufacturer to understand the timelines and that you're all on the same page, because things vary day to day, especially if we think about things like lockdowns that could change minute to minute, or day to day, minute to minute, something to keep in mind. And then we'll talk a little bit about, I skipped over actually pre-sending your inventory beforehand, but then also during and after you can consign materials, and I'll walk you through in the demo how you would do that in the MacroFab platform. Placing your order earlier, of course, and then just consistently checking your production lead times. So I'm going to jump real quick to a demo. So let me jump out of this PowerPoint and let me make sure that everybody can see this. So you should see a circuit board uploaded to our platform. This is one of our example demo boards, this MoCo development board. I'm not going to walk through all the specifics of like uploading a design into the MacroFab platform. We have a self-service platform where you can upload your design files from common EDA tools like Altium or KiCad or Eagle, and there's all sorts of guidance on how to get that uploaded. If you work with our sales team, they'll also be able to help you do that on your behalf. But if you are able to log into the platform, there's a couple things to keep in mind. So first, just going back to the 10-day service, I'm going to jump to this quote and order tab. We have some handy graphs that show you, the trade-off at various quantities and your per unit costs. And then we also have this handy graph that shows you what's the price versus lead time. And so right now I have things at a quantity of 1, and I had mentioned, that 10-day service is available up to about 50 units. So I'm going to go ahead and put 50 units here, and we're going to let it reach out to our supply chain partners and figure out what is actually feasible in real time. And you'll see that this banner up here updated. So we have different service tiers, and the fastest being the 10-day service that I had mentioned right here. And you'll see that what that estimated ship date is. And then some of our other tiers of service that are more dynamically generated lead times and price. A lot of, like I said, a lot of the PCBs for those products will be coming, for the cheaper products will be coming out of Taiwan and China. So what you see here is always the latest reflection of the supply chain. So you're going to start to see that the lead times are going to go from, say, 16, 18 days here in these middle tiers. They're going to start really creeping up once we get past that December timeframe. But I could pick, 10-day here, and right now I can order 50 units, get it in guaranteed 10 business days. But you'll see here if I up it to, say, 51, depending on whether this one I can't fit more units on it, but you'll see it grayed out, and it's only available for 50 units or less. So that's how you would pick 10-day, but I wanted to walk you through some of the other tips that I recommend for how to be more proactive and use the MacroFab platform. So if we jump back to the bill of materials, so this is a great view where we digest from your EDA tool all of the various components that go into your product. And there's some great real-time data feeds in here. I want to draw your attention to, let's see, this fourth line item here, this electrolytic 100 microfarad capacitor. So you look here in this column here of stock. That's a real-time, we're going out in real time to all of our vendors and looking at what is actually out there that we could buy turnkey for you today if you placed this order today. So almost 1,900 units, basically 1,800. That's actually not a lot, because anybody at any moment in time could order that, and that could be gone in just a matter of seconds. And so you're going to see dynamic availability here of stock. But the thing to keep in mind is this next column here. if your design relies on this exact component and there's no available substitute, the lead time for that is 49 weeks. That's crazy, and that's a lot of what you're seeing in the supply chain is these just year or more lead times for critical components. And luckily at Macrofab, we give you the ability to search for different alternates. So we've got dynamic searching where you can look for similar components. So if I wanted to look for, say, 100 microfarad capacitor and look at the different results that'll populate here, we've got access to all the data about those parts, so you can understand, okay, I'm going to add this alternate, and I'm not sure if this specific one is adequate. I'm just doing it just for demo purposes. But you'll start to build a list of what are your alternate parts. And we recommend having anywhere from 3 to 5 alternates for your designs, especially for stuff where you're seeing, hey, there's only 1,800 units out there. So that's something to think about, is bolster your alternative lists. The other thing that we allow you to do, and I alluded to this earlier, is this concept of, we can procure the part for you turnkey, but if it's a critical component that maybe you have stock on hand, or you just know it's going to be a hard to find part during that critical time period, we give you 2 options. We have the concept of inventory and consignment. If you select consignment, what that means is when you place this order, we're going to expect that you send the parts to us. So we just ask you to fill out a little bit of information, and once you pay for this order, you'll be directed to how to ship your consigned material. So if you want to think about buying stock ahead of time, and then if you have to place an order during the Lunar New Year period, you can then consign the materials. Just keep in mind, once you place your order, to keep schedules tight and on time, we typically require things within 4 business days to be received at our factory in Houston, Texas. So you'll have to factor that in of whether consignment makes sense for you with that just-in-time nature of it. The other option that you have is selecting inventory. And what inventory does is it looks to see what inventory do you have available at Macrofab. So you may not know, and here I'm going to there's some demo inventory that I could pull from. It's not compatible with this particular part, but I'm going to show you how to do that. So I'm going to open a separate tab here. If you look at the nav bar up at the top, you've got inventory, and you can manage inbound shipments. So I'm going to switch over there. So you can actually, look at your hard to find parts, and you can actually send those to Macrofab ahead of time. We don't charge you anything up front for doing that. So you would just simply create an inbound shipment. You would name the shipment. You would give us details about the parts. So you can see this is an example shipment, and then it'll give you guidance. Once you put all the parts that you plan to send in, you'll get information on how to send those parts in, so that when it comes time, if you have to place an order during this critical Lunar New Year period, when you select inventory on your specific BOM line item, you'll see the part, if we've scanned it in already, it's ready and available for you to use for that design. So that's another way, a third way to proactively manage risk, so that if those 1,800 units are no longer available, then you can pull from inventory and then place your order. Because otherwise the system, if there's no availability, it's going to say add an alternate, or sorry, we can't accept this order, and allow it to process. So you have to think about that. So look at your alternate lists, think about sending inventory ahead of time to Macrofab, and then also think if all else fails, you can consign just in time if you're able to land adequate stock for your particular order. And so that's everything I wanted to show you in the platform itself. So I'm going to jump back to my presentation here. Let me just pull that up and make sure that everyone can see things. So I'm just going to walk through a few last details about how to prepare. I covered a lot of this already, but making sure that you have the materials on hand. Again, look out through Q1. What do you need? Think about sending that ahead of time if Macrofab is your manufacturer of choice, and we can have all that for you on hand and ready to go. Other thing to keep in mind is that as you get into the holiday, everybody's realizing, oh, I can't manufacture and get quotes from overseas vendors. So now all of the vendors that are, say, domestically here in the US, they start to get slammed by RFQs, requests for quotes. And so you have to factor that in, is like not everybody's always proactive. And so it's just going to create this bottleneck here on the domestic side. And the other thing is, it's very much just in time manufacturing. So you have to keep that in mind here domestically of being proactive. The other thing to think about is just in the news, you're hearing a lot of talk about supply chain resiliency, or there was this trend to globalization and global supply chains, but now there's this deglobalization trend. I was reading a report from Goldman Sachs just talking about how they're basically spinning up a whole business unit just to finance all of these companies that are trying to move things back here stateside, either nearshoring or reshoring. So that's something to think about. But supply chain resiliency specifically, I recommend, if that's something that you're interested in, that you reach out to the Macrofab team and get in contact with some of our sales team about implementing what we call like a China plus one strategy. You may have had success with manufacturing in China, but that you need to build a more resilient supply chain and start to diversify. And so we're helping hundreds of customers right now just think about, how do I implement a China plus one strategy and bring some of my manufacturing stateside? And that's one of the benefits of Macrofab's platform, is we not only give you tools to upload your designs and get quotes, but we've got all sorts of great things in the background to be able to look at different factories and understand, where's the best place to make this that's going to give me the quality outcomes that I want, and the timeliness that I need to have a reliable supply chain. So I recommend, I'm sure we'll send you some resources after this webinar about how to work with us to figure out, your supply chain strategy going into 2023. And I think there's no better time than the pending Lunar New Year to start thinking about that and having those conversations. And the last point I want to bring is just organizing your logistics as soon as possible. Just expect those lead times that you're getting from your vendors. They're going to go anywhere from 3 to 5 weeks inflated lead times as we approach that Lunar New Year period. And it's going to take a while to work through the backlog. And just realize, we're still in the pandemic or recovering from the pandemic, depending on your perspective. We've never really returned to normal, or whatever was normal back in 2019. So, things are still touch and go. And, with the COVID policy in the APAC region, it has the opportunity to get a whole lot worse than it is. And that's the common theme we're seeing, is people have to plan proactively and just think about their supply chain. But just, we wanted to make sure that, our customers had what they needed to think about this immediate blip in the supply chain, which is Lunar New Year. And so that concludes my presentation and of everything I wanted to cover. So we're going to open it up for Q&A, and my co-host here will probably MC that part.
Hi, everyone. Please feel free, if you have any questions, to put questions in the question section, and we'll be sure to answer them. For now, though, I have a couple of them for you, Joey. Can you tell me how early my team should start looking at Lunar New Year preparations for optimal results?
Yeah, thanks, Veronica. That's a good question. We talked about it a bit during the presentation. Right now, by our estimates, you got to work backwards. You probably should be placing your orders by that second week of December. And so, it's already November 10th or so here, and we're about to have Thanksgiving holiday and then leading up to Christmas. So things are already starting to, there's already not that much time in the year. So I would say start planning now today. We've got teams here ready and able to talk to you about how to best implement some of the strategies that I talked about, but we also have those self-service tools where you can go in and yourself and get the same real-time supply chain information we're seeing and know when to best place your order.
Awesome. We have another question, and it's, I've done some research on China +1 strategies. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it's certainly I spoke a little bit about it during the presentation. I think it's certainly the most practical solution for the near term. I think a lot of companies realize that just having all your eggs in one basket is probably not the right move. But that being said, if you have a complex supply chain and you have a lot of know-how in these factories in China or wherever in the Pacific region, it's not exactly easy to just overnight get up and go. And so that's where that +1 strategy comes in, is you can start to work with companies like Macrofab to understand, okay, what are my options for nearshoring and nearshoring production here in the US. And actually Macrofab's specialty is all throughout North America. So we have factories in the US, Canada, and Mexico. And we've found that for high volume production, Mexico is actually a great option and can be quite cost competitive with China. So we have teams dedicated to just onboarding customers and starting their +1 strategy.
And then in addition to that, continuing on that question, how do you keep the integrity with the products using the China +1 strategy?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, quality is a major concern. Anytime it's natural human tendency to wonder, hey, I'm moving factories, all that know-how of how to make this product, how does that translate? That's where having a manufacturing platform like Macrofab, we keep a whole digital thread of your design. And when I say digital thread, I mean, you're designing products in your EDA tools. We're natively ingesting that information and keeping it in a digital domain. And so we have a whole continuity from your design tool all the way to the manufacturing floor. And so just keeping that single threaded design allows us to not make quality errors of, say, somebody exporting your designs to Excel or emailing that to somebody or having phone conversations and forgetting details. But then it goes beyond that. We have a whole network of factories that we vet and that we have continuous quality data on. So if you're a small to mid-sized company, you only have limited resources to vet factories for production. We can do that at mass scale. And so we're getting quality data on all of our customers. We're able to understand, hey, this particular factory is really good at building this particular type of product. And we know, with predictive capabilities, hey, they've got a higher probability to be on time with this type of product. And so we're able to look at factories all across North America and make sure that you're in the right factory for your particular product. We're seeing that, it's not a one size fits all. Even, if you have a portfolio of products, one factory, say in Michigan, may be a better fit, whereas for a different product line, maybe a factory in Texas or California is a better fit. Having a manufacturer or a manufacturing platform like Macrofab's allows you to tap into that without necessarily having to have your own team thinking about onboarding hundreds of factories.
We have another question, and it's, do you have domestic bare fab suppliers for small run builds?
Did you say bare fab, bare board?
Yes.
So Macrofab specifically doesn't just sell bare boards, but we do have suppliers domestically for, as I spoke to, our 10-day service, which do have access to domestic suppliers for those boards. And we offer the full assembly domestically for your finished products.
And then finally, are there any other world holidays that we should be aware of that we need to prepare for, the same as Lunar New Year?
Yeah, that's always a good question. Lunar New Year is the big one. I would say that the other big one is Golden Week, and that one is actually during October, and it's a very similar holiday where you've got like a week or two of people traveling for holiday and just less capacity for manufacturing. And so, we issue similar guidance during that time where you're probably going to want to think about getting your orders in a month or two in advance and thinking about during that last quarter of the year, pre-planning in the quarter before.
Very good. Does anyone else have any questions for Joey? Maybe we want to give it a couple of minutes to see if we have any other questions written in. Maybe not. I want to thank everyone for attending today. Make sure you keep an eye out in your inbox for a treat, but we'll also be sending you a copy of the PowerPoint and more information about how to get back in touch with us. And oh, wait, I had another question. Super fast. Are parts shipping from the Philippines affected by lunar holiday, by the Lunar New Year?
They can be. It is a country that on some level, some of the population is probably celebrating Lunar New Year. So that is something to keep in mind. I would say that the Philippines, we're not necessarily sourcing any bare PCB boards from that country specifically. So I think we're less prone to effects for the Philippines.
Very good. So again, oh, thank you, they said. So again, keep an eye on your inbox for a treat, a copy of the PowerPoint, and how to get back a hold of us. We hope to see you in the new year for upcoming webinars, and check out our website. Thank you. Thanks, Joey. That was great.
Thank you, everyone, and thanks, Veronica. It was a pleasure.
Bye.
Great job.
All right.